I'm going to start off tonight with a quick little video thing that I put together about the first portion of my trip, which was to Cambodia, where we spent our first month. And then I'll talk about some of the stuff what we did and that while we were there. But this will give you a little bit of an idea and general overview of what it looks like where I was at, so you might understand what I'm talking about a little bit better. All right. Well, that's a little bit of a sights and sounds type video of what was all going on while we were there. Some things interesting that happened. One of the more interesting things, when we were in Cambodia, we had the honor and the privilege to bring swine flu to the nation, and we're the first confirmed cases. So we had 4 confirmed cases with our group that made front page news. That's what the picture of the girl holding the newspaper was. She was the first one to bring it. So that was her article about her. And so that led to quarantine. And when you're in quarantine for any given amount of time with 50 people, inevitably that fashion show had to break out. So that's the story behind that. But we had a lot of awesome opportunities while we were there. And despite the fact we were in quarantine over half the time we were there, we still had a lot of time where we got to go out and do ministry. We had 2 days before where we went to what's called the Center of Peace, which is a orphanage / school type thing. They're not technically orphans, but their parents can't afford to take care of them and keep them, so they live at this place called the Center of Peace. And we went there, and what we did was vacation Bible schools and just played with them. And it rains all the time there, so we got to play in the rain with a bunch of little, what we call the orphans, but they're technically not. It's kind of sad at the same time though, because a lot of times their parents can't afford them, so they just hand them over and say, yeah, take care of them, and they don't see their parents really ever again after that for the most part. So their parents will come and visit maybe once a year for their birthday or something, and that'll be about the extent of it. And a lot of these kids are between the ages of 2 and 16. So that makes up the majority of them. And it was really kind of heartbreaking just to see all the kids. And I keep thinking there's pictures of them behind me, but there's not. But just to see all the kids and know that they don't really have a home, and know that even though they're there, their future still looks really slim, and they'll probably end up, once they're too old to live there, moving on to the slums. Because as an orphan, and they look a lot upon the caste system, so to speak. So if you're born in royalty, you stay in royalty. You don't really progress upward or downward. You pretty much stay where you're at in Cambodia. But the other thing that's really sad is a lot of those kids' parents were affected by what's called the Pol Pot regime. And basically what it was is a massive genocide that went on. There was a major war going on around the same time as Vietnam, and it was in Cambodia. And it was the Pol Pot regime attempting to take over what is now Cambodia. And everyone was really excited when Pol Pot won at first, because they're thinking, oh good, finally, freedom. But that's not how it worked out, because after the first day, I believe it's 1/3 of the population was wiped out within a day of the genocide taking over. So there is not a single person that lives in Cambodia who doesn't have a relative that was killed by the Pol Pot regime or maimed in some way. And that really affects their culture a lot, because most of the parents don't have father figures to look up to because they were killed off in the genocide. They've pretty much built a nation up in the past not quite 30 years from what happened, and pretty much he just took over schoolhouses and turned them into torture chambers, and they thought if you had any form of an education, or you were educated in any way, or could start a resistance, they killed you. And that's really taken a big toll on this nation. And it devastated the nation as a whole when it happened, but even now, still today, you can see the effects everywhere. You talk to people and they'll tell you the story of how they had to run from the gunmen because they were coming and killing them because they thought they had an education. They wanted to wipe out all the doctors, anyone who had education, teachers, whatever. They didn't want the nation to be able to rebuild because they wanted complete control. And we spent a day at the Genocide Museum where we saw a lot of pictures of the people who were killed. There's countless hundreds of pictures in this museum of just people who went through the torture systems, and he is said to have been worse than Hitler, if you can imagine that, amongst his own people. And it's really ravaged the nation as a whole, and it really takes an effect on you, knowing that you're standing, and we went to one of what's called the killing fields, and we went to one of them, and they have a tree specifically dedicated to throwing babies against it to kill them because they came from an educated family. This guy was absolutely ruthless, and you can see the blood stains on the trunk, and that right there set the tone for the rest of the trip for me, because all of a sudden I couldn't take what I'd seen and not love these people. These people have been through so much. They've been ravaged by war, and they're rebuilding. And 95% of the nation's Buddhist. So they have no hope other than the hope of what Buddha can give them. And he's not giving them jack squat. He's just taking their food and making them leave it for the rats. And basically we had the opportunity to just go in there and love on these people. And that, above all, was the one thing that really just struck me this summer, is just how far loving one person can go. Like, one sacrificial act of love is what's going to change the world. Because, I mean, if you don't love people, you're not going to do anything to make their life better. And you're not going to change the world if you're not making people's lives better and helping them and loving them and letting them see Christ's love in you. And so we just loved on these people. And after our first 2 days there, we got quarantined, which led to what I like to call a blessing in disguise, because we as a team just got to be that much closer. We got to know each other really well. Spend 8 days in a house trapped with all those people, and you'll know them pretty darn well by the end of it. So we had a good time, but we also had a lot of just prayer time for the country and stuff. And we did this one thing where we got some balloons, we had someone deliver them to the house, and we filled them up with air and paper mache and made the things that you hit. Piñatas, there we go. I knew I'd think of the word eventually. I just had to ask you guys, right? No. But we made piñatas out of like paper mache and stuff that we took to the orphans and stuff and let them break open afterwards, and they had a blast with that. And one other thing that we had the opportunity to do while we were there is go into the slums. And so what we did while we were in the slums is we would walk around and tell everyone, we're doing a drama, we're doing a skit, or whatever. And we had our translators with us. So I don't speak fluent Khmer, that's for sure. But we go around and we would ask them all, just like, come on, it's a free show. And they're all like, why are a bunch of, as they call us over there, Farang, coming to like do a free show for us in the slums, you know? Like, we're nobody, no one cares about us, not even our own people, you know? And so we went there and we just loved on these kids. We brought them all down. We had jump ropes and stuff with us, and they were having a blast. They loved it.